and welcome. I'm Carmen Pond, Global Healthcare Reporter at Politico. I'm pleased to welcome Representative Dwight Evans, a Democrat from Philadelphia, to the Harvard Chan studio. This conversation is part of a series called Public Health on the Brink, which explores the most urgent challenges facing public health, as well as promising solutions. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
Let's start with gun violence. More people have been shot in Philadelphia this year than in New York or Los Angeles, although Philly's population is much smaller. This is a problem citywide, but violence has been especially bad in North Philadelphia, where you grew up and where you still live. To give us a picture of what residents are facing, can you describe how things have changed in the neighborhood with regards to gun and crime since you were a boy in North Philadelphia?
Well, it has changed tremendously since I was a young man growing up. So much that there's a real fear factor by individuals throughout the neighborhood, concerned about being able to go to school, concerned about being able to go to their job, concerned about riding on mass transit. All of these issues that are facing them are really issues that I believe really affect Philly's ability to grow and to be safe. And the reality of it is, the question is, there are suggestions I have made about how we attack the problem. I don't think it's one quick instant answer, but it needs to be addressed. And I recognize as an elected official for this particular area that it is my priority to address the problem.
And over the summer, you announced an ambitious plan to tackle gun violence. It also has an ambitious price tag, more than $50 billion. Can you walk us through that plan?
Basically, the plan builds on a lot of the plan that President Biden has talked about. It talks about $51 billion. And the reason I address it is because I had the kickoff at a local hospital called Temple Hospital. And that particular location is a health center that is extremely important to the city, to the state, and to the nation in addressing this problem. And the reason I address it is because, as I said earlier, it has an effect upon neighborhoods, communities, schools, our economics, and the value of Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a great city. It has huge challenges. It can be addressed. So basically, I've said that it needs to be hit by all levels. The federal government, the state government, the local government. It needs to be all of those entities put together. And I believe, for example, with us passing the Bipartisan Violence Act, which had not been done in 30 years at the federal level, was the first. The fact that in the federal government, we had taken action to do something. And we had not closed our eyes to the problems that we face and to the problems that the neighborhood faced. So it's clear that we have to have all hands on deck to address this problem.
I wanted to ask you about the legislation that was passed in June, and that came to the surprise of many. As you said, there's been decades of gridlock on gun safety and gun rules in Congress. That law included incentive for states to include juvenile records in background checks. It also includes $13 billion in spending for mental health and school safety. Do you expect that bill will make a dent in gun violence in your city?
I believe it will contribute tremendously, one, to the people having a sense that there's a sense of hope and optimism. There's, as I said in the beginning, there's not a clear single bullet approach, but the fact of the matter, this is an attempt on our part collectively at the federal government, joined with the state government, with the local. For example, red flag laws are something that we do not have in Pennsylvania. And I do believe that is something that should be passed. The fact of the matter is, I don't think it's gun owners versus non-gun owners. It is a question of public safety. And this public safety has huge implications in every community in the city of Philadelphia. And until we really collectively address this issue, we will never solve it.
Are you in any way optimistic that you'll be able to build on this bill and get bipartisan support for other measures, including those included in your gun violence plan?
Well, when you raise a very good word, optimism, uh, you have to be an internal optim. And the reason I say you have to be internal because these problems didn't come about overnight, and that they're not going to be solved overnight. But certainly, a public health strategy is essential to addressing this problem. And it's clear to me that only through collectivism and public health can you really address this problem. As the plan that I laid out and the plan that the president has talked about and shown the kind of leadership is what we need. You know, this president talked about from the Rose Garden. That in itself is historical in itself. The fact that the president raised it to the fact and had a conversation about it in the Rose Garden. The fact of the matter is the partnerships that we have been able to put together, the leadership, it is something that you have to stay relentless on to try to undo, which has been years of neglect. And I think it's clearly the collective effort is where we eventually will reduce the violence that is occurring in our communities.
Hopefully so. I wanted to switch gears now and go to food security, which I know is a big priority for you. And you led the Pennsylvania Fresh Food Financing Initiative, which brought together public and private funds to help bring more than 100 grocery stores into neighborhoods where it was extremely hard to buy fresh fruit and vegetables. And the Obama administration later used this approach as a model in other states. Let's start a bit by describing the problem. What do food deserts look like in Philadelphia and around the country? And how do they affect residents?
Well, this is an issue I feel really personally committed to. And I thank Michelle Obama and her leadership using the platform of the White House and in particular of the First Lady was the first step. It was heightening the attention to it. And by using that particular position, she drove it to national policy in the Farm Bill. She took something, and as a result of her raising it through the consciousness of obesity, there's a direct connection of food insecurity to obesity relating to the quality of the type of foods that are available. But leadership is extremely important. It is a direct connection when we talk about leadership on food insecurity or violence. Those things are interconnected, but it starts with a very important element of leadership. It goes back to the point of what I said to you about President Biden showing the leader in the Rose Garden, having a press conference around violence, very similar to Michelle Obama showing that kind of leadership, having a garden in the White House. You see the commonality between Michelle Obama as the First Lady and President Biden as the president. And interestingly, I said to you, the leadership, as you know, they use the White House platform. So here I am, a congressman in the area. I piggyback on their position in leadership and use that opportunity to raise the consciousness to attack this problem.
And what's the solution here? What else can be done? And is it realistic that you'll be able to bring all these grocery stores in the neighborhoods that don't have one?
Yes, I think the president doing something that hadn't been done since Richard Nixon was president back in the 50s, holding a White House conference on food and food insecurity. Thanks to a gentleman, a colleague of mine, Representative Jim McGovern from Massachusetts, they used the White House as a platform to raise for the consciousness of this about food insecurity. This is not just a problem in the United States, it's a worldwide problem. I always say that food is medicine, and we must learn how to use that tool to address the insecurity around food and the quality of food, making sure people have access to food that is healthy food, because there's a direct connection between the lack of the healthy food, similar to what First Lady Michelle Obama talked about in terms of obesity. So the availability of food access is a very important element to addressing food insecurity.
And since we're about 2 weeks from the midterm elections and we now know the results, I wanted to get your reaction on those results. Now that Republicans have the majority in the House in the next Congress, how do you think that will impact your priorities?
Well, I would hope that individuals would focus on the outcomes. That's what I would hope. I would hope that they realize that the issues we are talking about, we need to be very focused on outcomes, which I think is very important. I have the pleasure, Pennsylvania is an agricultural state, and I was in the legislature for many, many years. So I have a real understanding about state connection to national connection. And I'm very optimistic that the chairman of the Agriculture Committee, I know extremely well, who will be from Pennsylvania. He's from central Pennsylvania. I'm hoping that he will take advantage of not the extremism that you heard in the campaign, not the extremism, but the ism on what touched people at their kitchen table. And food is an issue which is not Democrat or Republican, is an issue that is very essential that we address. You talk about food insecurity, you talk about violence, those are all interconnected. And I hope that that they look at this as an opportunity to do something in a positive way. That's all I can do is be optimistic. I will work very hard to try to take advantage of the opportunities that will be there to address food insecurity and gun violence.
I also want to talk to you about homelessness, which is obviously another major crisis facing the country. And Philadelphia has made some progress with a public-private partnership that focuses on building affordable housing and providing wraparound services, including education and healthcare, to families in need. What is your policy prescription for addressing homelessness on a national scale?
You know, it's interesting you said that. The Secretary of HUD was just in Philadelphia a couple of weeks ago talking about homelessness. And obviously, it's not a unique problem just to Philadelphia. You can talk about Los Angeles, you can talk about San Francisco, you can talk about other various issues. And there is no question that stability in home life is very essential in terms of education, in terms of food, in terms of all those things are interconnected. But you must be very purposeful in attacking this particular problem. And I've come out with a plan called Housing is Essential. When I first got elected in Congress, the first thing I did, because I wanted to be the housing congressman, I worked very closely with Maxine Waters, who's very much on the forefront of this issue. I worked with some of my other colleagues, but housing is at the crux. You talk about violence, you can talk about food insecurity, but housing is. I also think that's something that the White House is very active on. So if you notice, what I try to do is piggyback on things that the president is doing, which he's demonstrating through his leadership, and use my particular position on the committees that I'm on, like Ways and Means. I'm on a subcommittee on health. So those things are interconnected. And you look for the opportunity to form alliances, Democrat or Republican, rural or urban, to find some ways to address these problems. And I think right now, we still got a lot of work to do. I'm telling you, homelessness has a long way to go in terms of attacking the problem. But affordable housing is very essential, a part of attacking it. And these are the tools you need to have available, like the low-income tax credit program needs to be available, affordable housing, those things need to be available. These are the tools that need to be available to address this problem.
I also wanted to talk to you about pandemic preparedness. Obviously, we're years into this pandemic, and there's an outbreak of Ebola in Uganda right now, outbreaks of cholera in Haiti and other places in the world. How would you grade our national preparedness right now for another infectious disease like COVID or other type of infectious diseases that could cause an outbreak or even worse?
I think that it's a work in progress. I think that President Obama did well when he laid a very essential roadmap. And the question is, will the leadership take advantage of the roadmaps that are laid out? That's the first. Secondly, I think that President Biden, with Dr. Fauci, took the real lead, which was in terms of implementation, which is a very important element. We must all recognize that we must embrace science and the importance of science and what science do, because you want to get ahead of the game. You want to educate people. You want to increase their knowledge base of understanding. There's a whole connection of that. When I said food is medicine, is the element of how you use those tools and make those tools available. So we still got some work. Unfortunately, with the nature of our politics, it has become too political that in return interferes with the ability of implementation of acts that have been taking place. So this president, medical professions, we must use them all. All of them must be available. And researchers such as yourself and others must be fully involved in this, because I don't think this is just politicians. This needs to be everybody, all hands need to be on deck because of the effect that the medical aspect has on individuals, their lives. Health disparities is the area that I work on very closely. And I can tell you in my congressional district, you can see the huge effect that it has on people who are African Americans, who are Latinos, and others who are being unduly affected by these pandemics. It will only be through increasing the education aspect. And that means using the tools that we have, what I call in the toolbox, to increase the knowledge base to better approach how we attack these problems. And
obviously, preparedness has also a global aspect. We've seen with COVID that, borders don't stop pathogens. What do you think the U.S. can do to strengthen health security overseas and in turn also protect itself from new pathogens coming into the country?
You hit it right. I think the leadership issue, I'm going to keep going back to that. As I talked to you about violence, as I talked about food insecurity, it is leadership. As the president participates in various national forums and form alliances with other countries and all, that is very essential. We in America must recognize that we must form these alliances because it's in our collective interest. When I say collective, worldwide collective interest in upgrading the knowledge that is necessary. So I share with you that it's still a work in progress. You mentioned the midterms, and that was one stop. But I think the midterms sort of sent an example that people weren't interested in this extremism that is distracting from the message to attack the problem. I'm optimistic that the American people really understand that this is a national, worldwide problem, and that unless we work together, unless we meet the moment that we're in, we must meet the moment that we're in during this period of time. And we must look at it as something collectivism. And we all show our various leadership roles. And we do. We all have leadership roles to play a role in addressing what you just described.
And just going back to the midterms, several states moved to protect reproductive rights. It's also, a very hot debate right now in this moment that you talked about. Obviously, abortion is highly restricted or banned in many states, and some Republicans continue to call for a federal ban. Do you see any chance that Congress might codify abortion rights in this lame duck session?
Well, this was the one issue I was optimistic I would have hoped that the Supreme Court would not have taken their action in the first place. The fact that it was settled law and the fact that they attempt to reverse the take away a right is fundamentally wrong. And at the end of the day, when you look at it, we will have to stay with it, have to keep you involved. But you can look, I come from the state of Pennsylvania, we had a very successful election for United States Senate and governor. And I think, I always describe this where America started at. If you look at those two, that Senate race, that governor's race, you look at all the congressional candidates were reelected in Pennsylvania. All 9 was reelected, the Democrats. If you look at the state Senate, House, you look at the legislature may be back majority. To me, those are indicators. Those are indicators. Look at the congressional, look at the House. All those are indicators, should tell you something about here in Pennsylvania, one of the original 13 states. And it's very important to understand that and look at those indicators in terms of what happened and look at Pennsylvania particularly.
Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for your time, Representative Evans. It's been
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to the Harvard Chan School for hosting this conversation. Have a good day.